Cheety has been making a reputation of building industrial-grade 3D printers and making them available to us at an affordable price. But their newest edition is a little bit different, and that's because they're trying to give us even more. So let's take a look at all the features of the brand new QIDI Q2, and then we'll see how it performs, and we'll see if there's any room for improvement as well. We're going to also talk about the price, so stick around. It wasn't that long ago when we bought a printer, we need to spend 3 hours assembling it and then days or even weeks tinkering with it to get it to print well. Now, most newer enclosed printers are pretty easy to get started printing with, and Cheety has it to a point now where most of the work you need to do is finding a way to pull it out of the box. They try to keep their printers as light as possible while also having a stiff frame and heavy duty parts along with glass panels. And they've done a pretty good job on this printer with the packaging and the protection and the instructions to make it easy for anyone to set up. It takes about 10 or 15 minutes to get this printer set up, just the printer alone. And another 10 or 15 minutes if you want to use the Cheaty Box, which is for multi-material or multi-color. And like all the best printers on the market, it prints right out of the box. That is after the initial automated calibration cycles, of course. This printer is US MET, which is Metro Electrical Testing certified. This is probably something that all 3D printer manufacturers should have, but as far as I know, Cheety is the only one to get this so far. This is independent testing, and that means that the printer is tested to make sure that it's safe for both use at home and in workspaces as well, and that it complies with UL and also OSHA regulations. It is one of the ways that Cheety is pushing their competition to do even better, and it's something we should be looking out for in the future for our printers that we buy, because although we're not supposed to leave our machines unattended, the reality is quite different. This is a fully enclosed printer, which I think is a necessity these days. It definitely helps to increase the print success rate to close to 100%. It also allows the printer to have a heated chamber so that we can print high temperature materials like ABS, polycarbonate, and even PET. An enclosed printer also makes it possible to keep the printer in a dirtier environment, and it's pretty easy to wipe the top and keep it clean. Sometimes printing a low temperature material like PLA in an enclosure can cause a problem with heat creep, and it can also cause a problem with too little cooling because the circulation of warmer chamber air. So they've created an easy way to slide the glass top panel back and be able to draw in cooler room air. It isn't automatic, but automating this comes at a price too, and I'm a big fan of these solutions because there's nothing to break or wear out or replace, and it's pretty easy to do as well. Cheety now has their own multi-material feeding system that they're calling the Cheaty Box, and they actually went the same direction as Bambu and made theirs able to dry filament as well. But they also did one thing different, and that it can dry filament while the print is going, which I think is a really handy feature, especially during the more humid months of the year. So it does rely on desiccant inside to keep things dry, and it also has a plug on the back that you can open up during the drying cycle to exhaust some of that humid air. It can reach 65 degrees Celsius for drying, which is good for most filaments. I think the built-in dryer is going to become the new standard, so it's nice to see them being one of the first to do it. The Cheety Box sits on top of the printer, but it can also sit off to the side. The PTFE tubes are long enough to have it sit to the side or down if you want it to as well, if that's preferred. Instead of having a single tube coming out of the back, each spool has its own separate tube, but they provided these clips to keep it nice and tidy. And then I added these 2 additional zip ties as well. The Cheety Box is quite a bit different in that it relies on stepper motors to feed each spool of filament in, and I don't see a buffer system at all, so it somehow knows how much to feed in to match or come close to matching the extruder. It seems to be simple and effective, and because it can heat up to 65 degrees Celsius, all of the parts are made from materials which can handle those temperatures like ABS and polycarbonate. I'm told that you can have up to 4 of these feeding into one printer. Personally, 1 has always been enough for me, but I like them mainly because they keep the filament dry, they keep them visible as well, so I know what I have on hand, and they also keep the dust off of the spools. When I run low on one spool, the next one automatically takes over so that I can use every last little bit of filament on that spool, and I don't even need to think about it. The Cheety Box is also compatible with the Plus 4, but it does require an upgrade kit. With the Cheety Box, which I'm going to call the QB from now on the top of the printer, the top still does slide fairly easily. It is a little bit harder to move, but it's not too bad. And I'm assuming these little clips are on the top to make sure that if the QB sits towards the back of the printer on the glass, that the glass cannot tip. The printer has two extra shorter windows on the sides, and even though it has a clear top and a clear door and an LED light on the inside, it still does get a little bit dark with the QB system on the top. The side windows let a little bit more light in. They also allow us to easily see in from the side and see what's going on. There is one thing to be aware of with this side window, especially the one on the left-hand side, and that is if you want to make sure that you're never caught on camera, you might want to stick something onto the left pane of glass, and that's because the built-in camera can catch you picking your nose. The case itself looks like metal, but it is ABS, just like their other printers, and it also looks very similar to the Plus 4 with this somewhat futuristic look with hard lines and flat surfaces. The color's not too light and not too dark. The dark colors tend to show a lot of dust, and the white machines tend to look cheap, in my opinion. Like other multi-material or multi-color printers, we need a bit of space at the back of the machine to the wall for the PTFE tubes. And for this machine as well, the glass will slide back about 120 millimeters or 5 inches. And I know we don't need to use the full 5 inches, but it's probably a good idea to have some space behind your printer to the wall for this machine. I also noticed that this printer has mounting holes for an exhaust hose adapter, which is a little bit of a benefit for an enclosed printer, so that you can easily vent it outside and keep your indoor breathable air as clean as possible. This printer comes with the Ethernet cable adapter, and it will send the purge out here, and it will land on the desktop or bench top, so there is no way to capture that material right off the bat. We would need to design our own solution. I don't tend to print a lot with different colors in one print, so I don't end up with that much printer poop myself. If we look inside right away, we can notice the biggest difference is the linear rail for the X motion or X travel. This is normally something you'd see on a high-end printer. Good linear rails are precise, they're long wearing, and they're also low profile, so that saves some space in the printer compared to having two rods. We still see rods on the Y motion and the Z motion, but those are spaced quite far apart. We're seeing a little bit more compact and even more advanced nozzle wiping system. We have this small stainless steel bar attached to a silicone wiper, which should quickly cool the filament and then wipe off the excess. Below that, we have a serrated knife set down at an angle to keep the purge in the chute. And surrounding that, we have thin steel plates on the side, and then this flap that comes up is also coated in steel as well. That steel causes the filament to instantly cool to prevent it from sticking to the sides and building up. So far in all my testing, it has been 100% for purge being sent out, so we're off to a pretty good start. The inside of the printer has less exposed parts, and the fit and the finish look pretty good inside there as well. And it's not crazy important, but a smooth inside does make it easier to keep clean. And I think in this case, at the back of it, it also helps to shield the motors from the heat in the chamber. It also looks nice and professional too. This printer has a dedicated heater which goes from room temperature to 60 degrees Celsius in about 12.5 minutes, and the bed heating to 100 degrees Celsius and the chamber to 60 are pretty close to getting to temperature at about the same time, which does make sense. It's not crazy fast, but we've seen that printers that heat the bed too fast have issues with bed warpage, and this printer produces really nice first layers, so that's not an issue. Now you might notice that the print head is actually really slim. Narrowing it like this is going to allow it to move to the right and to the left a little bit more, giving it the best possible print volume. This printer is 270 by 270 by 256 in the height. The QIDI Plus 4 for comparison is 305 by 305 by 280 in height. I think most people would probably find 270 to be plenty for their projects. I started printing with 220, so anything larger than that is a pretty good size. On occasion, I'll print something a little bit bigger, but it's pretty rare. So you'll need to judge for yourself if the size is right for you, but I think the narrower print head was a good idea. It's around 20 millimeters narrower than the head on the Plus 4, so that's a good move on their part. They've also switched to a load cell in the hot end for bed leveling, which I think also helps them to save some space on the print head as well. The nozzle is bimetal and easy to swap out even when the nozzle is cold, with a size range from 0.2 all the way up to 0.8, which should cover just about everything we needed to do, from those highly precise models to super strong structural parts. I also like that the entire front cover can be removed and we can set it aside out of the way to make the swap that much easier. One of the beneficial changes that they made with the Plus 4 was that the belts have a tighter tooth spacing, and they kept that same upgrade with the belts on this printer as well. They have come up with a new hinge design. This is kind of like a D-shaped design. What that allows is for the door to be positioned outside of the opening. Normally there's a pin on the top and the bottom, and the door is right in here. So that moves the door slightly out, just giving us a little bit more clear space here, but it also allows the door to open beyond 90 degrees as well. And it seems like it's pretty sturdy. These look to me like they are anodized aluminum. The touchscreen is more responsive than the previous generation. You can see it's pretty quick there. There's also a filter in the back here. You can see we can pop this cover off. And it's easier with two hands, but you can do it with one hand. This is a 3-stage filter. There's a pre-filter, a HEPA filter, and then this activated carbon in behind here as well. And these are supposed to be consumable, so they need to be replaced every once in a while. I still will highly recommend, if you're going to be printing high temperature material, that you vent your printer outside. And you can see that there's a plastic cover that's added on here that kind of blends in. And I think the reason for this is to prevent the drag chain when it rubs on here from wearing away at this section. I started out with the Benji Prints on file for this printer, and of course they look really good. And I wanted to print some parts that I've had trouble with and I actually need. So I printed an upgraded version of my Anaconda filter. Now the previous version that I printed looked good on the outside, but the inside was a bit of a mess because of the overhangs and issues with cooling. Using Cheety Studio, I left everything as standard and I used basic PLA for the first print, and I found that the overhangs on the inside were a little bit better than my previous version, but still not quite good enough. So on the next version, I slowed down the print and then opened the door and the top of the printer as well, and that seemed to do the trick. I kicked it up a notch and I tried a full-size print with ABS glass fiber 25 filament from Cheety directly from the QB while it was drying as well. And I know most companies don't recommend putting brittle filament through, but the QB has hardened gears and it seems to do a pretty good job with the ABS glass fiber. And I think part of the reason for that is because the filament is being warmed just before it gets in. Now, if you're doing this, I'd recommend at least making sure the filament is a little bit dry first. And lastly, I wanted to try something I've never done before, so I printed using Cheety's high temperature PET carbon fiber filament. This is not PETG, it is PET. And this filament is extremely rigid, but also fairly brittle as well. But as you can see, it turned out and it looks pretty good. So there are a lot of really nice features on this printer, but there are also some things which could use some improvement. The front handle isn't that easy to grip for me. My fingertips are a little bit fat and round. This isn't that important, I know, but maybe a little bit longer standoff and get some more distance behind that pull for a finger would be a really good solution. The QB during the initial feed is a bit noisy, and I had a closer look to see where that sound was coming from, and it seems to be a result of the way that the gears are designed. And that's because they slip in one direction. And it only lasts for a few seconds during the initial feed cycle for each material or for each color. I have reported this back to Cheety, but I don't really consider this to be a defect. It's just a bit of a different type of design for the feed system, and it's a bit louder for a few seconds. The PTFE tubing inside the chamber at the very top still rubs on the underside of the glass, and eventually that will wear down after a few hundred prints. Maybe a little piece of felt on there would help with that, but so far the only printer that I've ever owned which has not had an issue with this rubbing is the Bambu H2D, and that's because it has a lot of clearance at the top. It's not a necessity, it's just a nice thing to have. This printer does not auto-calibrate filament, and that's a pretty big time saver, especially if you like to print with lots of different filaments like I do. So I would love to see if Cheety can find a way to integrate this into their next generation of printers. For all of my testing, I never did any calibration on the filaments and the results were still really good, but for very precise fitting parts, calibration is still a good idea. So if you've been waiting to buy a 3D printer because it didn't have the features that you wanted or couldn't print the variety of materials that you wanted or the price was too high, the QIDI Q2 has all of that. They are also open printers, meaning that you can still tinker and improve them if you want to. After spending some time with this machine and testing it out, I have no issues recommending it to anyone looking for a solid, top-performing printer at a great price. And speaking of the price, they have this printer on for an early bird price right now of $449 US for the printer alone, $599 for the printer and QB or the Cheaty Box combo, which I think is a pretty good price considering that the printer can literally do everything from multicolor to multi-material to high temperature materials requiring a heated chamber. So if this printer is what you've been looking for, I will have a link down there below to check out, and that link also does help to support this channel if that's something you're interested in doing. If you have any questions about the printer, or if there's anything you'd like to see printed with the QIDI Q2, please let me know in the comments down there below. Thank you to each of my patrons for helping to support this channel and making videos like this possible. And thank you to Cheety for sending me this printer to test out as well. I hope you enjoyed the video, found that helpful. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one. Be from now on, the top, scratch this whole section. The fit and finish look good inside. I think most people would probably find 270 to be plenty for their, I think most people would probably find the 270 to, while it was still drying, and most companies don't recommend putting the Cheaty Box or the, scratch that.